Blessed Keys. Blessed Keys. Presents. Voices.
Good morning and welcome to Voices. It is always a pleasure to welcome you here in this channel. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't to help further the gospel of Jesus Christ, because that's what we're really here for. Today we're going to be talking about something that dropped in my spirit this week about the discipline of remembering. Sometimes we tend to forget God's promises, what God has put forth in our lives, his plans. And when we're going through, when we're not all there, when we're not feeling joyful in the moments that we have trials and tribulations, maybe you got bad news, maybe you lost your job or something of that sort, or you're struggling financially, it's very difficult to remember God's faithfulness. So what I would like to do today is to present it as a discipline, as an action item in our journals this week. For instance, the spiritual discipline that strengthens your faith. That's what you should title. What are the spiritual disciplines that will strengthen my faith when I'm going through? Psalm 77, 1 through 12, 77, 11 through 12, and I'm taking this from the ESV. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. This is something that I'm suggesting for you to do this week, and that is to list 5 things God has done for you that you never want to forget. Then thank him for every one of them, because remembering God's faithfulness isn't simply looking backward. It is preparing your heart to trust him forward. This is my central thought today. We don't remember what God has done because he needs reminding. We remember because we need reminding. Remember, for instance, Abraham. In the biblical account, it reveals how his walk was built trusting a promise he couldn't see fulfilled. And I'm referring, of course, to Hebrews 11:8. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out up to the place which he would receive an inheritance. Abraham had to remember who had spoken when circumstances contradicted the promise. Can you stop to remember, even in your trials, even when you face disappointments, that God was faithful then, that he provided then? Without picking up the Bible, can you recall to your mind the verses that strengthened you then? And then you saw his hand and how you were delivered. That's what I want you to write down. What did God deliver you from? Was it from addiction? Was it from an abusive home environment? Was it from a bad job? A job that was pulling you down, taking away your joy? God had already proven himself to Abraham that he was faithful. You can connect to God even in your darkest moments. You can connect, you can make, that's why it's called discipline. A soldier is disciplined. He recalls what the Lord has said in the past. That is having the strength of and the self-control to say, wait a minute. I am not allowing the situation to change my faith level, to change my joy level, because my joy is in the Lord. I know that if he delivered me from that affliction or that problem or that lack, that he will do so again. I want to also bring Moses into the account. Moses' story teaches us that the wilderness can make you forget if you don't intentionally remember. Israel had experienced God's miraculous deliverance from Egypt. They saw the Red Sea part. They watched God provide manna. They drank water from a rock, not water from around the rock, but from the rock. They saw God's presence. And yet, when another difficulty came, and they will, I promise you, come. Just when you're singing victory, another problem will arise. They repeatedly complained. Don't do that. Don't fall into that trap. They repeatedly complained and questioned God. To be disciplined about remembering means I stop those intrusive thoughts from coming and entering into my heart, into my mind. I stop them, I push them back, and I begin to remember what God has already done for me. And I wish that you do the same today. And yet, when another difficulty comes, don't question God. Make yourself remember that he was faithful then and that he would be now. So why did they begin to complain, the Israelites, when they had seen the miracles and the wonders? Why did they begin to complain? Because they forgot. Deuteronomy 8:2 says, "And you shall remember that the Lord your God led you all the way." Notice that God specifically tells them to remember the journey, not just the destination. Remember the wilderness. Remember when you didn't know where the provision would come from, whether or not you would survive the surgery. Remember when you thought you couldn't make it. And now remember, God brought you through. The wilderness does not mean God has forgotten us. Sometimes the wilderness is where God teaches us to not forget him. And Moses himself experienced a wilderness season before his assignment. There are many seasons of dryness, of preparation, of suffering that the Lord will put you through as he's strengthening you and preparing you for what he has planned and purposed for you. He went from the Pharaoh's palace to Midian. For 40 years, he lived as a shepherd. What looked like a detour was actually preparation. I can speak to that. I can testify to that. To being prepared in a hidden place, to doing things people didn't understand, to going forth into a strange land because he had said I should, and I got confirmation from others that I trusted. And yet there are still people that are walking away, shaking their heads, trying to figure out what I'm doing here. Then God called Moses from the burning bush. God called me at 3 a.m. to give me instructions. Moses asked, and I asked too, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? Who am I to go forth to a strange land? That's what I asked. How is that exactly going to happen? I'm an old woman. My husband is a sickly man. He is also old. How are we to put away 30 years that we've accumulated in a home and sell that home, go forth to a strange land, and live in a small apartment in Switzerland? How is that going to happen? And then Exodus 3:11, he answers to Moses, and God answered so. Moses, you are, he didn't say, Moses, you're talented enough. He didn't say, Grace, you are talented enough. It was certainly, I will be with you. That's what the Lord said to Moses, and he has also said to me. Faithfulness isn't just remembering what God has already done. It's remember who he is, his makeup. It's the intimate moments that you spend in prayer. It is in the despair that you find his comforting hand. He communicates through others. You get a text from a loving sister or brother that says, I was just in my devotional, and the Lord has asked me to give you this psalm to read, and you read it, and it touches your heart, and it gives you strength because you know that God has seen you in your desert place. He has seen you like Hagar. And you recognize that you don't walk this walk alone, that this isn't your burden to carry, as he says in Matthew 28. He says, my burden, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Yet we don't look at those things. We don't remind ourselves of those things. Moses had to move forward based on God's promise. I had to move forward based on God's promise. He did not give Moses a map. He did not give Abraham a map. He did not give me a map. But you have to remember it's based on God's presence, not on your own ability. He doesn't give you the map. I want to touch on the Israelites right now about that it matters when we forget. The Israelites forgot. In Psalm 106:13, it says they soon forgot his works. They didn't forget because God hadn't done anything. They forgot despite everything God had done. That is spiritual amnesia. A spiritual amnesia is dangerous in our times. It was dangerous then, but even more so today in the end days. Because when we forget God's faithfulness, our current circumstances become larger than our history with God. When we forget what God has done, we begin to interpret God through our circumstances instead of interpreting our circumstances through what we know about God. David, for instance, he said in Psalm 77, I will remember. David was struggling. He was questioning. He was crying out. Just stop right there. Have you been there? Are you presently there? Are you like David struggling and crying out? But this is where the shift comes. In Psalm 77, 11 and 12, I will remember the works of the Lord. Surely I will remember your wonders of old. David was intentional. It was a decision that David made. David didn't wait until he felt better. He didn't wait until he felt like remembering. He commanded his soul to go back and remember. Remembering God's faithfulness is a spiritual discipline. It is like the soldier in the army. When you are when you're completely self-controlled, sometimes you have to intentionally remind yourself, God answered me before. He provided for me before. He protected me before. God opened doors before. God has healed. I am the first one to raise my hand. He has healed me before. He has healed my husband before. God made a way, and he has never stopped being God. When the earthly king dies, such as in the passage of Isaiah 6:1, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord. That's fascinating. Isaiah's eyes were confronted with the loss of an earthly king. But suddenly, he looks up. He said, I looked up, and he was sitting high upon a throne in the temple. And his train filled the. He saw the majesty of his God. Sometimes God allows something to be depended upon, to disappear. He'll take the legs from underneath you, and all of a sudden you're suspended, so that we can remember who our ultimate source has always been. People change. Friendships change. People's loyalty change. Governments change. Circumstances change. Churches change. Leadership of those churches change. Our finances change. Our bodies change. Our seasons change. But God does not change. Malachi 3:6 says, for I am the Lord, I do not change. He declares it. He makes a statement about himself. What has God already brought you through? Let's go through that section. Don't just think about it. Don't just think about it in passing. Remember it. What prayer did he answer? What door did he open? Write it down in your journal this week. What impossible situation? I have seen people healed of cancer. We just witnessed several weeks ago in our prayer time where Doris's father, they threatened to amputate his hand. And a woman full of faith went to the hospital. First, she stood in proxy for her father in faith. And then she presented herself to the hospital and she anointed him before surgery. They came back calling her and saying they did not have to amputate his hand. What impossible situation did he make a way through? When did you think you wouldn't survive and yet you're still here? I'm one of them. I'll testify to that. When did you have nothing and God provided? When did you feel alone and God met you? When did you not understand and later realize God was leading you all along? Write it down. Create your own spiritual memorial. Joshua 4 is wonderful here as an example. After Israel crossed the Jordan, I just want to talk about the incident with Joshua. God instructed them to take 12 stones. Why? So that when the children asked, what do these stones mean? They could tell them what God had done. That's what testimony does. It preserves God's faithfulness for the next generation. I think this is where you can begin to think about how it began with Abraham. Abraham learned that God keeps his promises. Moses learned God is with me in the wilderness. David learned I must intentionally remember God's works. Isaiah learned my eyes must remain on the heavenly King. And we learn my memory can become an altar of remembrance. When tomorrow comes and fear tells me God won't do it this time, I can answer, but I remember. When uncertainty says you don't know what's going to happen, well, it could be this, if you go left, you should have gone right. We know those uncertain moments. You can answer, no, I don't. But I know the one who does, and he has been faithful. When the enemy says God has forgotten you, I can answer, I remember his faithfulness. I would like to just touch on how I recall to mind. Everything that I recall, I hope, it gives me hope. So if I remember and hope returns, then not only are the circumstances not maybe changed at the moment, but because I hope in him, because I am praying, because I'm intentional, when the intrusive thoughts come in and start to invade my heart and fill me with uncertainty, I can be consequent in my answers. So if you recall to mind that Abraham remembered and hoped, not because the circumstances had changed yet. His circumstances hadn't necessarily changed. He went into, when the Lord sent him forth, what about his son Isaac? When he was asked to sacrifice his only son, what was his ultimate answer? Well, the Lord has provided before. Well, even if I carry it out, what the Lord has asked me to do, the Lord is capable of resurrecting him. Think about that, how he was able to continue to reassure himself that the Lord had provided so many times. He had provided a son that he had promised to him and to Sarah. And that prophecy and that I'm saying that promise came through. So even when you cannot see God, what he's doing, what he's up to, sometimes all you see is darkness. So sometimes all you see is the bad news that the cancer has returned, or the heart issue is worsened, or the child has completely succumbed to drugs and alcohol. And you begin to question God. You begin to question, did I hear right when the Lord promised that my son would serve him? Unbidden, I got a prophecy that my son would bring others to him. That's not what I see. That's not what I've been seeing. I see a lost soul. I see potential that is not working. It's not serving the Lord in the way it should. Does that mean that he won't be delivered? I guarantee you that I will remember when the Lord delivered. And believe you me, it's not easy. It is not easy to sit in the seat of uncertainty. It's certainly not easy to sit in a seat where you're wanting and you don't know how you're going to pay your rent. You do not know how the outcome of that illness will be. You know what the diagnosis is. You know what the doctor said. I mean, Doris, when she called me about her father, well, it's in the bone and, there's nothing they can do about it. And, man will give up. She didn't. And she was rewarded for her faith because her father has a hand intact and is healing. And there are numerous testimonies that I could give you today. But the one thing I want to drive home is I gave you examples of faithful individuals. You may answer and say, yeah, but I can give you examples of people that died, that people weren't delivered, that my prayer was not answered. And I can tell you that even in the bad, God is still operating for the good. What I can ask you is, what did you learn in that valley? Maybe that was ultimately the outcome of that. My uncle was sick. He became very ill toward the end of his life. And I can tell you, my uncle, if you spoke about Jesus to him, he would shut you down. Bitterness would rise in his voice. And he would say to me, Grace, where was God when I suffered as a child, abandoned and alone? I don't believe in this God. I reject him outright. And I would be quiet. And I continued to pray for my uncle because he was a good man, a very good man, full of flaws, as we all are. But his heart was good. And then I read a testimony from my cousin when she posted it on Facebook. And she said that for months before his death, she had the opportunity to share the gospel with her father. And it was during that time that her father accepted Jesus as his Lord and Savior. Don't tell me that God is not in the middle of things. I just ask you to remember. I ask you to write it in your journal. I ask you to be disciplined enough to look above the circumstances that you face today and dare to believe, dare to remember. Do not allow the enemy. Do not let his words be louder than the promise that God has given you. Do not allow discouragement to be your friend and your constant companion. We are living in the darkest days ahead. I am not ashamed to say that that is so. Not to make you full of fear or for clicks or likes. I'm saying it because that is exactly what's happening in this world. And you would have to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to see the signs yourself. Whether you live in denial, whether you reject Christ, whether you say, I'm not a Pentecostal or a Christian, I don't follow that religion. The one thing I want you to know, it's not about religion. It's about following God. G-O-D. And the biggest challenge of following God is to read his word and follow it. God said to many of his disciples when he first met them, he said, follow me. He didn't hand them a contract or a reassurance that by following him, they would have a cushy job or nothing but prosperity, a nice car. He simply said, follow me. He's saying it again today to you. Even if you are a follower, he says, pick up your cross today. Do not be lukewarm. I vomit lukewarmness out. I need someone on fire, someone who's suffering but still believing. I need someone that will not take no for an answer. I need someone to read the scriptures and see in Psalm 121 that you must lift your eyes to the heavens and know where your help comes from. That was sent to me this week and probably one of my toughest weeks that I've had. Someone said they in their devotion that psalm dropped in their spirit for me. And I'm thankful because it reminded me again, lift up your eyes to the heaven. And I'm paraphrasing, of course. For whence comes your help? Your help comes from the Lord, from him who made heaven and earth. So that's what he reminded me of, even when I was overwhelmed and needed myself these same words to encourage me. But you know what? I follow the voice of the faithful one. I am still seeing the tornadoes. I am still seeing the earthquakes. I am still seeing the suffering in the world. But then I see the rescue in a building of a newborn child. And that gives me hope. That's what gives me the drive to sit here today and share with you the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because it doesn't guarantee me anything when he said to follow him. I never decided to follow him because I thought I was going to get a better deal. I followed him because he's worth it. I followed him because he's a prayer answerer, and he is someone that I put my faith in 100%, even when it wavers, because it does. I'm a human being too. And just because I have a title doesn't exempt me from suffering. What it does is it gives me testimonies to share with others, because I will deal with people that have never even set foot in a church for more than I don't know how many years. They have not listened to a sermon. But what I'm doing here is becoming the hands and the feet of God on the earth. He's given me authority to rebuke all of the weapons that the enemy is forging against me. He has given me authority to push back in the spirit. He's given me the ability to pray for others and encourage them in their walk, in their valley, and continue to cheerlead them as they waver and they look for answers, and they're fearful and they're uncertain, but they're still seeking. All I'm asking you today is to remember to take your experiences in the desert, just as Joshua did. They took those 12 stones and they put them together. And I thought, what a beautiful image as I was preparing this podcast. I said, what a beautiful image to remind the next generation of hope, of deliverance of the Lord, how he came through for them, so that when they are facing their challenges, they can be reminded again of this omnipotent, omnipresent, majestic God that has never left their side. And we have so many examples of that today. The Bible is full of examples that encourage us in the Psalms, as well as in the stories of the prophets, how they had to overcome. I'm reminded of Elijah. What a courageous prophet he was to face 450 Baal. What are they? Baal prophet. They call them prophets too. Baal prophets. And he stood there and said, bring it on. Bring it on. Imagine the enormous confidence that this prophet had to have to stand before and mock them. He went so far as to mock them when they were cutting themselves. This is in, I think it's 1 Kings 19. I know it's in if somebody could correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I'm pretty sure it's in 1 Kings. And he mocks them. He even goes to say, pour more water on the altar. After they had hours upon hours been beating themselves up, crying to their God, Baal, nothing happened. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. He stood there, said, pour some more water around those rocks. More water around the altar. All I'm trying to impart in you today, first of all, read the story of Elijah and the 450 Baal prophets, because it's a very great, encouraging word, especially if you're going through some difficult times. And then he calls out to God. He prays to the Lord. And the Lord sent the fire that not only consumed the offering, but the entire altar. God can come through like that for you. He sometimes comes in a huge bang where you're like, I'm sure that Sister Doris felt that. God really came through like in a bang. When she called and told me of what had happened with her father, I said, wow. I was like, wow. He came through but sometimes he comes in a whisper. And if you're too busy complaining, non believing, woe is me, bitter, angry, you will not hear that voice. You will not pick up on the direction that God is taking you. Sometimes you just have to give in and just lie in front of your altar and be silent before God. Let him heal you before he delivers you. Because sometimes these trials can take a lot out of you. They can do a lot of damage. Look at Job. But one thing is for sure today, as I bring this podcast to a close, when you cannot see what God is doing, remember what God has already done. His past faithfulness is evidence of his unchanging character. And remembering his faithfulness gives you the strength to trust him with your future. God bless you. And I'll see you here next Saturday at 10 a.m. with a new episode of Voices. Do not forget to like, to share, and subscribe to this channel in order to carry the gospel further to others that need to hear this message. May God bless you and keep you, and have a wonderful, safe weekend. Bye-bye.